In a small, cozy cafe tucked away in a quiet part of the city, a young woman spent her days serving coffee, pastries, and sandwiches to customers who rarely noticed her. She moved swiftly behind the counter, her movements practiced and precise, yet her presence often felt invisible. Most people saw her as just the waitress, the person who took their orders with a polite smile, refilled their water glasses, and carried plates of food across the room without drawing attention. They did not see the life she carried inside her, the music that lived in her heart. She woke up every morning before sunrise, the city still wrapped in a gentle hush. The streets were empty, save for the occasional delivery truck rumbling by or a neighbor walking their dog. She liked the early mornings, the quiet before the day began, when she could think and feel without interruption. Her apartment was small and simple, with a little balcony where she kept a few plants. A small dusty piano sat in the corner, an old instrument she had saved for years to buy secondhand. It was scratched and worn, but to her it was perfect. Every day after preparing herself for work, she walked to the cafe, passing through streets lined with old brick buildings, cafes and little shops. She always felt a strange mix of excitement and dread as she approached her workplace. The cafe was her livelihood, yes, but it was also the place where her dreams seemed distant, almost unreachable. She loved the smell of fresh coffee, the sound of cups clinking, the chatter of customers, but she could never shake the feeling that her life was moving in circles, going nowhere fast. She had a deep love for music, something that had been a part of her since childhood. Her parents had given her piano lessons when she was very young, and she had quickly fallen in love with the instrument. There was something magical about how pressing the keys could turn her emotions into sound. Happiness, sadness, longing, excitement, all could be expressed without words. But as she grew older, life had become more practical. Bills needed to be paid, and a steady income was necessary. Dreams of performing on grand stages or composing music were tucked away, kept safe in a corner of her mind, waiting for the right moment that never seemed to come. At the cafe, her shifts were long and tiring. She greeted regulars with a smile, remembered their orders, and offered friendly conversation when she had the chance. Some days were busier than others, filled with customers who rushed in for their morning coffee, hardly noticing her beyond the transaction. Others were quieter, with only a few patrons lingering over their drinks, reading newspapers, or tapping on laptops. During those quieter moments, she sometimes allowed herself a small indulgence, imagining what it would be like to play her piano in front of people who truly listened, who understood music not just as background noise but as a language of the soul. Her co-workers often talked about their own dreams and frustrations, sharing stories about parties, relationships, and weekend plans. She listened politely, smiling and nodding, but rarely shared her own thoughts. Music was private for her, sacred and too personal to discuss casually. Occasionally, a co-worker would ask if she played anything, and she would shake her head, laugh softly, and change the subject. It was easier that way. She did not want to risk disappointment or misunderstanding. Music had been her escape, her refuge, and she wanted to keep it untouched by the everyday grind of life. Despite the monotony of her days, she found small moments of joy. The aroma of freshly baked bread, the laughter of children sitting with their parents, the satisfaction of a table full of happy customers. These were her little victories. She took pride in her work, in the way she could make someone's day a little better with a kind word or a hot cup of coffee. But at night, when the cafe closed and the city lights flickered, she felt the pull of her true passion. She would walk home slowly, thinking about the melodies she had composed in her head, the songs she longed to play, the harmonies that seemed to dance in her imagination but never found their way into the world. One particular evening, after a long shift, she lingered at the cafe, helping her manager close up. The place was quiet now, the last customers gone, leaving behind the faint scent of coffee and pastries. She walked over to the corner where the piano stood, its wooden surface reflecting the dim lights. She brushed her fingers across the keys gently, feeling the familiar smoothness and the comforting resistance beneath her touch. A soft sigh escaped her lips as she pressed a few notes, testing the instrument. The sound echoed slightly in the empty cafe, a gentle reminder of what she loved and what she had almost forgotten in the rush of daily life. As she played, memories of her childhood flooded back. The small living room where she had first touched the piano, the excitement of learning a new piece, the pride when her parents clapped at her performance. She remembered the way music had made her feel alive, powerful and free. Even now, after years of hiding her talent, that same thrill ran through her veins, making her heart race and her mind come alive. She played for a long time, losing herself in the melodies, letting the music speak what words could not. Her manager, who had been tidying the shelves nearby, watched silently, careful not to interrupt. He had worked with her for years and had always admired her dedication and quiet strength, though he had no idea about the depths of her talent. The piano music filled the space, and for a moment the cafe seemed transformed. The ordinary walls, the simple tables, the familiar chairs, they all faded into the background, leaving only the music and the woman who created it. It was as if the room itself held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. She played pieces she had composed herself, small fragments of songs that told stories of longing, hope, and courage. Each note seemed to carry a part of her soul, and she felt a connection to something larger than herself. It was in these moments that she remembered why she loved music so much. It was not about fame, money, or recognition. It was about expression, about communicating emotions that could not be spoken. It was about touching hearts, even if only for a fleeting moment. Hours passed without her noticing. She was completely absorbed, and the world outside the cafe seemed distant and unimportant. When she finally stopped, her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, reluctant to break the spell. She took a deep breath and leaned back, a soft smile on her face. The music had given her something she hadn't realized she was missing, the reminder that she was more than the daily routine, more than the job, more than the life that seemed small and confined. That night, as she walked home, the city lights casting gentle shadows on the sidewalks, she felt a spark of hope. Something inside her shifted, a quiet determination stirring. She did not know what the future held, nor did she have any idea if anyone else would ever hear her play. But she knew that she could not ignore this part of herself any longer. The piano, the music, the melodies that had lived in her heart for so long. They were calling her, urging her to step beyond the invisible walls she had built around her life. As she lay in bed that night, she thought about the cafe, the piano, and the music that had always been her secret. She imagined a time when people would listen, really listen, when her talent would not be hidden but celebrated. She thought about the way music had the power to change moments, to make people feel, to leave them in awe. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be more than what it had been. A life not just of serving others, but of sharing her gift with the world. She drifted off to sleep with a smile, the melodies of her imagination playing softly in her mind. Tomorrow would be another day at the cafe, another day of taking orders and refilling cups, but she knew that something had changed. She carried a secret, a spark, a quiet flame that could not be extinguished. And deep down, she felt that one day that spark would ignite something extraordinary, something that would show everyone that she was not just a waitress. She was an artist, a musician, and a woman with a voice that the world had yet to hear. The morning sun filtered through the cafe windows, casting warm golden light on the familiar tables and chairs. The young waitress moved behind the counter as usual, her steps quiet but steady. Yet today something felt different. She could not shake the memory of last night, the feeling of the piano keys beneath her fingers, the music that had seemed to awaken something deep inside her. It lingered in her mind like a gentle whisper, calling her to do more than just serve coffee and pastries. The cafe was beginning to fill with the morning crowd, office workers grabbing breakfast, students sipping their first cup of coffee, and regulars chatting with familiar smiles. She greeted everyone with a polite nod and warm words, but her mind wandered. She imagined sitting at the piano again, playing for people who truly listened, who felt every note as she did. The thought made her heart race, a mixture of excitement and fear. Could she really do that? Could she let others hear the music that had lived in her heart for so long? Her manager noticed her distracted expression and walked over. "You okay?" he asked, handing her a fresh cup of coffee. She smiled and nodded, thanking him quietly. She didn't want to explain. How could she put into words the longing that had awakened inside her, the secret joy that only the piano could bring? She kept it hidden, just as she always had, afraid that anyone who knew might see her differently, maybe even doubt her. As the day progressed, the cafe buzzed with activity. Orders came in rapidly, cups clinked, and plates were carried from the kitchen to the tables. She moved with practiced precision, keeping a friendly smile on her face. Still, her thoughts drifted back to the piano. She remembered how the notes had flowed effortlessly, as if the instrument itself knew her soul. The music had been alive, vibrant, and powerful. It had reminded her of who she truly was beyond the apron, beyond the orders, beyond the life that everyone else saw. Later, during a quiet moment, one of the regular customers, an older man who often read the newspaper while sipping his coffee, looked up and noticed her lingering gaze toward the piano in the corner. "You play, don't you?" he asked with a gentle smile. She blinked, startled. How could he know? She hesitated for a moment, then shook her head quickly, giving a soft laugh. "Not really," she replied, brushing her hair back nervously. But he simply nodded, as if understanding more than she had said. The day wore on, each hour blending into the next, until the evening approached. The cafe had announced a small open mic night, something they did occasionally to bring in more customers. Musicians of all ages would come, some shy and timid, some confident and loud, ready to play for whoever chose to listen. When she heard the announcement, her stomach tightened. Her heart beat faster. She had never performed in front of anyone before, and the thought of doing so terrified her. Yet a small voice inside whispered, maybe this was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to step beyond the walls that had kept her hidden for so long. As the night began, the cafe transformed. Lights dimmed slightly, and a small stage was set up with a microphone and the piano in the corner. People gathered, chatting excitedly, some looking forward to seeing friends perform, others curious about the music they would hear. She watched quietly from behind the counter, her hands fidgeting, her mind racing. Could she do it? Could she really step forward and let them hear the music that had lived in her heart all these years? A young musician went first, playing a lively piece on the guitar. The audience clapped politely, some cheering. She felt both admiration and fear, imagining what it would be like to have all eyes on her, to have every note scrutinized, every mistake noticed. The thought made her stomach twist. She wanted to run away, to hide, to continue being invisible, but then she glanced at the piano, the familiar wooden keys gleaming under the stage lights. It was calling her, and something deep inside refused to let the opportunity pass. When her turn came, she walked toward the piano, her hands trembling slightly. The cafe fell quieter as people noticed her moving to the stage. She was just the waitress, after all, the person they had seen every day taking orders and serving coffee. Some exchanged curious glances, wondering why she would perform. She took a deep breath and sat down, placing her fingers on the keys. The first note sounded soft and hesitant, but then it flowed into the next and the next until the melody filled the room. The audience grew silent, captivated by the unexpected beauty emanating from the once invisible waitress. As she played, she felt herself becoming someone else entirely. The fear melted away, replaced by a sense of freedom and joy she had never known in her everyday life. Each note carried her emotions, longing, hope, courage, and happiness. The cafe seemed to disappear around her, leaving only her and the music. She noticed faces in the audience softening, eyes widening, mouths opening slightly in awe. People were listening, really listening, and it was more powerful than she had imagined. By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood clapping and cheering, some even whistling in amazement. She felt a rush of emotion, relief, pride, and a deep sense of belonging. For the first time, she was seen not as a waitress, not as someone ordinary, but as an artist, someone capable of touching hearts through music. The older man from earlier nodded approvingly, a warm smile on his face, and a few others came forward, eager to compliment her and ask about her playing. After the performance, she stepped back behind the counter, her hands still shaking slightly. Her manager approached, eyes wide with amazement. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "You're incredible." She smiled, her cheeks flushed with emotion. The fear and hesitation she had felt earlier were replaced with a quiet pride, a growing confidence. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something beyond the routine of her daily life. Word of her performance spread quickly. Some customers shared videos on social media, and soon people outside the cafe were talking about the waitress who could mesmerize an entire room with her piano playing. She received messages from local musicians, teachers, and even a few small music venues inviting her to perform. The idea was both exciting and overwhelming. She had never imagined that something she loved so privately could create such a stir, that her hidden talent could inspire and move others. That night, as she walked home, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The city streets were quiet, the moon casting a soft glow on the pavement. She replayed the night in her mind, remembering the faces of the audience, the sound of the applause, the way the music had flowed through her. She realized that she had crossed a threshold, stepping from a life of invisibility into one where her true self could shine. The thought filled her with a sense of possibility, a hope she had not dared to feel before. Back in her small apartment, she sat at her piano, gently pressing the keys, replaying the melodies from the cafe in her mind. She had touched lives tonight, even if only a few, and it changed something within her. She could no longer ignore her passion, could no longer hide behind the apron and the orders. The music was a part of her, and now it demanded recognition, attention, and expression. She allowed herself to dream, to imagine a future where she could share her gift more freely, where her life was not limited by routine but enriched by the beauty she could create. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind was alive with new ideas, new melodies, and new possibilities. She had taken a risk, stepped into the unknown, and found that her courage was rewarded. Tomorrow would be another day, another shift at the cafe, but she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. She had glimpsed a life beyond her daily routine, a life where her music could inspire, move, and captivate. And deep down, she felt that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change her forever. The next morning, the cafe felt different to her. The air seemed lighter, the smell of fresh coffee somehow more inviting, and the soft hum of conversation more like music than noise. She moved behind the counter as usual, but there was a quiet excitement in her chest, a feeling that something new had begun. People greeted her as always, but today their smiles seemed warmer. Their glances lingered a little longer. A few recognized her from the night before, whispering among themselves about the performance that had left them in awe. She carried out her tasks with care, her mind drifting between the familiar rhythm of the cafe and the melodies that had filled the room the night before. Each cup of coffee she poured, each plate she carried felt different somehow. It was as if her world had shifted slightly. A secret had been shared with the universe, and it responded in kind. She noticed small details she had ignored before. The way sunlight fell across a table, the gentle laughter of children, the subtle notes of conversation blending into a quiet harmony. Her manager approached her during a brief lull, his expression a mix of curiosity and admiration. "You really surprised everyone last night," he said quietly. "I didn't know you could play like that." She smiled softly, feeling a warmth she could not entirely explain. "I guess it's been a long time coming," she replied, her voice gentle. She did not want to speak too much, did not want to ruin the magic with explanations. The music had said what words never could, and that was enough. Throughout the day, she noticed a new energy among the regulars. Some stopped to compliment her, expressing awe and wonder. Others lingered by the piano, their eyes shining with curiosity, almost hesitant to disturb the quiet reverence that had grown around her. She began to realize that music had a way of connecting people, of creating a shared space of emotion and understanding. The realization thrilled her, made her feel a sense of purpose she had never experienced in her ordinary routines. As the afternoon wore on, a local music teacher entered the cafe, a man with a kind face and an air of gentle authority. He had heard about her performance through social media and had come to see her for himself. He watched quietly as she moved through her tasks, noting the care in her work, the grace in her movements. When the cafe quieted down, he approached her gently. "I hope you don't mind me saying," he began, "but your playing last night was extraordinary. Have you ever considered performing more publicly?" She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The idea of performing outside the cafe in front of strangers who expected perfection was both thrilling and terrifying. She had always dreamed of sharing her music, but fear had held her back, kept her in the safety of anonymity. Yet something in his tone, a quiet encouragement without pressure, made her feel that this could be a new beginning. I've never really thought about it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled warmly. "Well, if you ever want to explore it, I would be happy to help. You have a gift that shouldn't stay hidden." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Customers came and went. Laughter and conversation filled the room, and she found herself glancing at the piano more often than she had in years. The memory of the music, the connection with the audience, and the sense of purpose lingered in her mind. A gentle hum beneath the surface of her daily life. She began to imagine what it would be like to play for more people, to bring joy and emotion through her music, to step beyond the boundaries she had set for herself. That evening, the cafe hosted another small gathering, this time with a few amateur musicians performing songs of their own. She watched from behind the counter, her fingers tapping along instinctively, the melodies resonating with something deep inside her. When the last performer finished, she felt a quiet pull toward the piano, an urge she could no longer ignore. She glanced around, seeing the anticipation in a few curious eyes, and felt a surge of courage. Without a word, she moved to the piano, her heart beating rapidly but her hands steady. As she began to play, the room fell silent once more. The first notes were soft, tentative, almost shy, but they quickly grew in confidence and power. Each key she pressed seemed to speak directly to the hearts of those listening. Patrons who had come for a quiet evening of coffee and conversation were now captivated, their attention held by the music of someone they had known as ordinary only moments ago. She played with feeling, with abandon, allowing every emotion she had kept hidden for so long to pour into the melodies. The audience was mesmerized. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, unable to look away from the transformation taking place before them. It was not just the skill that held their attention, but the emotion, the sincerity, the way the music seemed to carry a piece of her soul into the room. She felt a connection to each listener, a silent communication that transcended words. In that moment, the cafe was no longer just a place for coffee and pastries. It had become a space of shared feeling, of beauty and wonder. When she finally finished, the applause was immediate and heartfelt. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some even wiping away tears. She sat back, breathing heavily, her hands still trembling from the intensity of the performance. Her manager approached, his eyes wide with amazement. "I don't know how you do it," he said softly. "You've changed everything here." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The fear and doubt that had held her back seemed distant now, replaced by a quiet confidence and a recognition of her own strength. In the days that followed, more people came to the cafe, curious to hear the waitress who could play so beautifully. Some came just to watch, others to listen, and many left inspired, talking about the experience long after they had gone. She found herself becoming more comfortable in her new role, embracing the opportunity to share her music while continuing her work at the cafe. The piano, once a secret refuge, had become a bridge between her inner world and the lives of those around her. Her interactions with the music teacher continued, and he offered guidance and support, helping her explore new techniques and pieces. She discovered new ways to express herself, experimenting with different styles and compositions, finding joy in the process of creation as well as performance. Each day brought new challenges and rewards, a delicate balance between her duties at the cafe and her growing identity as a musician. She began to notice subtle changes within herself as well. The fear that had once held her back seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose and direction. She felt more confident in her interactions with others, more willing to take risks, more attuned to the beauty in everyday life. The music that had always lived in her heart was now becoming a guiding force, shaping her experiences and relationships in ways she had never imagined. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she walked home through the quiet streets, the city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. She replayed the evening in her mind, remembering the faces of the audience, the sound of the applause, the way the music had filled the room with light and emotion. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the recognition, but for the realization that she had finally stepped into her true self. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a key to freedom, a pathway to connection, a voice for emotions that had long been unspoken. As she lay in bed that night, she reflected on the journey so far, from the quiet mornings behind the counter to the electrifying moments on stage. She had discovered a side of herself that had always existed, waiting to be acknowledged. She realized that life could hold more than the ordinary, more than routine and repetition. It could hold wonder, creativity, and the power to touch others in ways that words alone could not achieve. Sleep came slowly, accompanied by the gentle hum of melodies in her mind. She imagined new pieces, new performances, and new possibilities. The world felt larger now, filled with opportunities she had never dared to dream of before, and deep within her a quiet determination grew stronger, a promise to herself that she would continue to explore her music, to share it, and to live a life that was true to the gifts she had been given. The piano had awakened something extraordinary within her, and she knew that her journey was only beginning. The days following her first few performances were filled with a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. The cafe was busier than ever, with customers who had heard about the waitress who played the piano flocking in to witness her talent firsthand. Some came quietly, finding a corner to watch, while others gathered around the piano, unable to take their eyes off her hands as they moved across the keys. She continued with her usual tasks behind the counter, yet now every action she took felt different, infused with the subtle knowledge that she was no longer just a part of the background. Her music had become a bridge, connecting her to people who had once only seen her as a simple waitress. Her interactions with customers changed subtly too. They began asking her questions about music, about the pieces she played, and even about the emotions that inspired them. She answered modestly, never boasting, yet a quiet pride shone through in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she realized that her talent had the power to spark curiosity and admiration, to open conversations that went beyond the everyday small talk about coffee or pastries. Her world, once defined by routine, was expanding in ways she had never imagined. One afternoon, a small group of music students arrived at the cafe. They had heard about her performance online and were eager to see her play. Their presence was intimidating at first. They watched intently, eyes wide, waiting for her to begin. She felt a flicker of nervousness, but remembered the encouragement she had received from the music teacher, who had first noticed her talent. Taking a deep breath, she moved to the piano, the keys familiar beneath her fingers. The first notes she played were soft and tentative, then grew in confidence and expression. The students watched in awe, some even taking notes, inspired by the way she translated emotion into sound. Word of her talent spread beyond the cafe. Local journalists began reaching out, curious to share her story. She received messages from small music venues and community centers inviting her to perform. Each invitation was both thrilling and terrifying. She had spent so many years hidden, unsure of her place in the world, and now opportunities were coming to her faster than she could process. Yet she realized that she could no longer ignore this calling, no longer keep her music confined to secret practice sessions. The world was ready to hear her, and she had the courage to step forward. Her manager, who had watched her transformation closely, offered support and encouragement. He rearranged the cafe schedule to allow her more time to practice, ensured the piano was always in good condition, and even helped coordinate some of the small performances that began to take place within the cafe. The support from those around her reinforced her growing confidence, helping her see that her talent could create real impact and connection, that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she stepped away from the piano, feeling the exhilaration of having shared her heart with an attentive audience. The applause had been overwhelming. Yet what struck her most was the quiet moments after the music ended. Patrons approaching her, sharing how the melodies had touched them, expressing gratitude for the beauty she had brought into their lives. It was a revelation. She had always thought of her music as a private escape, but now she realized its true power lay in connection, in the ability to move others, to make them feel something beyond the ordinary. The music teacher continued to mentor her, helping her develop new techniques, guiding her in exploring different genres and styles. She discovered joy in learning, experimenting, and creating. Each new piece she played felt like a conversation, an exchange of emotion and understanding with those who listened. Her confidence blossomed, and she began to see herself not just as a waitress who played piano, but as a musician with a voice and a purpose. The small cafe, once just a place of work, had become a stage where she could express her true self. Her personal life began to shift alongside her musical journey. She found herself more open to connecting with people, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings. The quiet confidence she gained through music permeated other areas of her life, giving her strength in ways she had never experienced. Even her coworkers noticed the change, commenting on the new glow in her eyes, the calm assurance in her manner. Music had not only transformed her role in the cafe, but had begun reshaping her entire sense of identity. The cafe continued to host small gatherings and open mic nights, and she became a central figure in these events. People from all walks of life came to hear her play, drawn by the story of a waitress whose talent had been hidden for so long. Some were curious, some skeptical, but most left in awe, carrying the music with them in their hearts. She realized that her journey was not just about her own growth, but about inspiring others, showing that hidden talents and passions could emerge in the most unexpected places. Her growing reputation led to opportunities beyond the cafe. Local events and small music festivals invited her to perform. Each new experience was a mixture of excitement and challenge, yet she embraced them fully. She discovered that performing in different settings before varied audiences enriched her understanding of music and herself. The more she shared, the more she learned, and the deeper her connection to the art form became. She began to see music not only as a personal refuge, but as a powerful means of communication, capable of bridging divides and touching hearts across all boundaries. Despite the rapid changes, she remained grounded. She continued working at the cafe, cherishing the familiar routines and the sense of community it provided. Yet she approached each day with a new perspective, appreciating the ordinary moments as much as the extraordinary ones. The interplay between her daily life and her music became a source of inspiration, each influencing the other, each adding depth and meaning to her experiences. She understood that her journey was not just about recognition or success, but about authenticity, about embracing who she was and allowing that truth to shine through her music. One evening, after a performance, she sat quietly by the piano, reflecting on how far she had come. She remembered the days when her music was a secret, played only in the solitude of her apartment. She thought about the moments of fear, doubt, and hesitation, and how each had been overcome by courage, determination, and a willingness to share her gift. She realized that the applause, the invitations, the admiration, all were meaningful, but the true reward was the discovery of her own strength, the realization that she could create beauty and connection simply by being herself. As the cafe emptied and the night settled in, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had stepped beyond the boundaries of her former life, into a world where her music could live openly, touch others, and reflect her inner self. The piano remained a constant companion, a trusted friend that had guided her through fear and doubt to a place of confidence and purpose. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, moments of uncertainty and difficulty, but she also knew that she had found her path, and that the music would continue to lead her forward. That night, as she walked home beneath the soft glow of streetlights, she thought about the possibilities yet to come. The city, once a backdrop to her routine life, now seemed full of potential, a place where dreams could be nurtured and shared. She carried the melodies of her performances in her heart, the emotions, the connections, the quiet victories that had shaped her journey. And as she lay in bed, the piano music still echoing in her mind, she felt a sense of anticipation and hope, knowing that the next chapter of her life was waiting, filled with music, connection, and the promise of something extraordinary. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of change for the young woman. Her life, once defined by routine and quiet anonymity, now pulsed with the rhythm of opportunity and possibility. Each day at the cafe was different, filled with the hum of conversation, the clinking of cups, and the subtle awareness that she was no longer just another face in the background. Patrons who had once overlooked her paused to listen, drawn in by the quiet power she had discovered within herself. Her performances had grown in complexity and confidence. She experimented with new pieces. Some she composed herself, others classic works that allowed her to explore emotion and technique. Every time she sat at the piano, she felt a thrill, a sense of purpose that made her daily life feel more vibrant and meaningful. The music teacher continued to mentor her, helping her develop skills she had never thought possible. He encouraged her to take risks, to play with feeling, and to let the audience experience the full depth of her expression. Word of her talent spread beyond the cafe. Local venues and community events invited her to perform, eager to witness the story of the waitress who had hidden her gift for so long. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for larger audiences and unfamiliar stages. But each invitation was a challenge she could not resist, a chance to step further into the life she had always imagined but never dared to pursue. Slowly, she began to accept these opportunities, learning to navigate the nerves, the excitement, and the joy of performing in new spaces. The first time she performed outside the cafe, in a small local hall, she felt the familiar pang of fear. The audience was larger, their expectations unknown, and she worried about making mistakes. Yet, as she placed her fingers on the keys, a calm settled over her. She drew on every lesson she had learned, every quiet hour of practice, every emotion she had poured into her music. The first notes sounded soft and tentative, then grew in confidence, weaving a tapestry of sound that captured the hearts of everyone listening. By the time she finished, the audience erupted in applause, some rising to their feet, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment and pride. Her journey was not without its challenges. There were moments of self-doubt, days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, and times when the fear of failure crept back. Yet each challenge became a learning experience, a reminder that growth required courage, persistence, and faith in herself. She learned to balance her cafe work with her music, finding that the two complemented each other in surprising ways. The cafe remained her home base, a place of comfort and community, while the piano became a portal to her dreams and a means of sharing her inner world. Her relationships with people began to deepen as well. Patrons who had once been casual acquaintances now became friends, inspired by her story and her music. Fellow musicians offered guidance and collaboration, and the music teacher remained a steady source of encouragement and wisdom. Even her co-workers noticed the change, commenting on the light in her eyes, the calm confidence she carried, and the sense of purpose that had grown within her. Music had transformed her, not only in skill and opportunity, but in the very essence of who she was. She began to understand the true power of her gift. It was not merely about performance or recognition. It was about connection. She saw the effect her music had on others, the way it brought smiles, sparked tears, inspired reflection, and created shared experiences. She received messages from people who had been moved by her performances, some describing how the music had helped them through difficult times, how it had given them hope or comfort. These stories touched her deeply, reinforcing her belief that her music mattered, that it could make a real difference in the lives of others. As her confidence grew, she also found joy in composing her own pieces. She explored new melodies, experimenting with harmonies and rhythms that expressed the full range of her emotions. Each composition was a journey, a reflection of her experiences, thoughts, and dreams. She often played these pieces first for herself, discovering nuances and feeling the music take on a life of its own. Then, when she shared them with an audience, she felt a profound connection, a silent conversation between her heart and theirs. It was an exhilarating and humbling experience, one that reminded her why she had loved music from the very beginning. The cafe continued to serve as a backdrop to her journey, grounding her in everyday life while providing a space for growth and exploration. She cherished the familiar routines, the friendships she had built, and the sense of belonging that came from being part of a community. Yet the piano had become her compass, guiding her toward new experiences, new challenges, and new connections. Each day she discovered more about herself, about the world, and about the power of following one's passion. Her performances expanded in scale and scope. She played at charity events, local festivals, and small concert halls, each venue offering a unique audience and new opportunities for expression. She learned to read the energy of a room, to adapt her playing to the mood of the listeners, and to create moments of magic that lingered long after the music ended. With each performance, she grew more comfortable, more confident, and more attuned to the transformative power of music. One particular evening, she was invited to play at a citywide cultural event. The hall was filled with hundreds of people, many of whom had heard of her story. The weight of expectation was heavy, but she embraced it, knowing that she had prepared, practiced, and grown ready for this moment. As she played, she felt the familiar rush of connection, the electricity of shared emotion, and the deep satisfaction of seeing the audience captivated by her music. When the final note faded, the applause was thunderous, and she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and belonging. Through all these experiences, she remained grounded and humble. She never forgot the days when her music was her secret, the quiet moments spent alone at her piano, or the simple joy of practicing without an audience. Those memories kept her centered, reminding her of the journey she had undertaken and the courage it had required. She recognized that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, resilience, and a willingness to embrace opportunity were equally important, and she understood that every performance, every audience, and every note played was part of a larger story, a story of growth, discovery, and the power of believing in oneself. Her life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. The once invisible waitress had become a musician, an artist, and an inspiration. People admired her talent, yes, but they also admired her courage, her humility, and the authenticity she brought to her music. She had discovered that greatness often hides in unexpected places, waiting for the right moment to shine, and she had stepped into that moment, allowing her gift to touch the lives of many. Despite her growing success, she continued to approach each day with the same warmth and kindness she had always shown. She greeted customers with a smile, served coffee and pastries with care, and remained attentive to the small details that made the cafe welcoming. Yet now each smile exchanged, each conversation held felt richer, infused with the depth of experience she had gained through music. She understood that her journey was not only about performance, but about the connections she forged, the lives she touched, and the joy she shared. As the months passed, she began to plan for the future with intention. She envisioned recording her music, composing original pieces for wider audiences, and perhaps even teaching others who, like her, had hidden talents waiting to be discovered. She realized that her journey was ongoing, a continuous unfolding of opportunity, learning, and creativity. The piano had given her not only a voice but a purpose, a way to express herself fully and authentically. One quiet evening, after returning from a particularly moving performance, she sat at the piano in the cafe alone, reflecting on all that had changed. The room was empty, the lights soft, and the keys beneath her fingers familiar and comforting. She played a simple melody, one that encapsulated her journey, the fear, the courage, the growth, and the joy. She played for herself, for the memory of who she had been and for the promise of who she was becoming. In that moment, she felt complete, knowing that her music had found its place in the world, and that she had found her place within it. As she closed the piano and left the cafe that night, the city lights twinkled like stars. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken, for the courage she had found, and for the gift of music that had transformed her life. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, that moments of doubt and uncertainty were inevitable. But she also knew that she had the strength, passion, and resilience to face them. Her life had been forever changed, not by fame or recognition, but by the simple act of following her heart, embracing her talent, and daring to share it with the world. And so, the woman who had once existed quietly as a waitress now lived fully as a musician, an artist, and an inspiration. She had discovered that true greatness often begins in unexpected places, and that the courage to embrace one's passion can open doors to a life filled with purpose, connection, and beauty. The piano remained her constant companion, a symbol of everything she had overcome and everything she had yet to achieve. And with each note she played, she reminded herself and the world that even the most ordinary life can hold extraordinary possibilities.